Hello everyone and welcome to this evening's panel discussion for Ireland's future. You're all very, very welcome. We have a fantastic panel for you to listen to tonight. I'm very excited about the people that have joined us here, and I'll introduce them. So we have Denise Chaila from Limerick, and she's a rapper and songwriter. So next we have Conall Corra, who is an Irish language activist. We have Senator Eileen Flynn joining us as well. Eileen is the first senator from the travelling community. We have Laura Harmon joining us, a long time and long serving equal rights campaigner. And we also have Heather Wilson, who is a political activist from North Belfast. Each of you are very welcome, and thank you again for joining us this evening. So, first of all, I think we'll go to Conall. Really, Conall, to start off this evening's debate, how do you feel that Ireland is set up currently for a discussion around unity?
Neil Gurney, thank you for having us on. It's been an honour to be asked to do it. I think everybody can kind of agree that partition has been an abject failure for everybody on this island, bar the interest of a very, very small amount of people. We're now 100 years on from the foundation of the state, and I think one of the big issues, and regardless of your politics and regardless of how kind of this came about, and regardless of how the two conservative states were set up, I think everyone can agree, and it's factually sound that both states were set up wasn't a democracy. It wasn't a democratical decision when it was taken, and I think now that we're 100 years on and we're kind of, as a result of that decision being taken and the lack of democracy and the lack of transparency around it, I think we're in a position now, and I think we're in a very fortunate position now to have this conversation in a way we weren't maybe 100 years ago. We now have the ability and capacity to challenge and to shape and to kind of mould the discourse around the United Ireland and a new Ireland and what that new Ireland looks like. And it's with these conversations, I think, and fair play to Ireland's future for kind of leading the charge on this, why these conversations are so important, because we want to be able to shape that future. We want to be able to. It's the opportunity. We now have the opportunity to build a new Ireland, and one that serves all of its people. So I think now is the time to have this conversation, and I think now is the time to begin planning. I think it's crazy to not. I think it's crazy to it is crazy to bury your head in the sand and not see how things are changing right across Ireland. So I think now is the time, and now is the time that we can shape that conversation.
Okay, so we have seen from events across the water where the Brexit referendum happened, and it looks, largely to many people that there was very little planning in place, and we have seen probably change and counter change coming from both sides through their negotiations, and certainly that wouldn't be a state we would like to find ourselves in come the time. And I suppose, Laura, as somebody who has had experience with the marriage referendum in the South, how do you feel that a referendum on Irish unity could be started and could be done properly to ensure that we actually would progress after the outcome of it?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I just want to say thanks so much for inviting me to this discussion. It's great to be part of it, and I think it's an issue that first of all we shouldn't shy away from. I don't think we should be afraid of this. I think in terms of a border poll, it needs to include everyone on the island. There needs to be very clear, I think, terms of reference in terms of what the referendum would look like. And I think that now is the time to start engaging with different communities, with Unionist community around the issue as well. And I think that in terms of a referendum, I think absolutely, I think political parties, need to get on board. I don't think it can be led by, I suppose, any one particular party, but I definitely think that it needs to be led by civil society and civil society groups. And I think there's a huge opportunity now to kind of build a dialogue around that and to kind of foster that dialogue. We saw with the marriage referendum here, how important that it was, led by civil society, from people across all age groups, all walks of life, And I think that everybody needs to be included in the debate. Everybody needs to be included in the discussion, and it needs to be a respectful one. So I think that first and foremost is how we should work towards it. I don't think it should be rushed. I certainly think it's something that we need to get absolutely right. But I think it's an exciting prospect, and I think that we should have the opportunity on this island to have a mature debate around this, a respectful debate. And I don't think that it's an issue that we should shy away from.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, there are so many different reasons that we could list here that are real key signs that, Ireland is going to change in the near future. And, even politics are changing all around the world. So with that, given the opportunity to kind of design our own new Ireland, or a new country for everyone, Denise, what way, and what aspirations would you have for a new country?
I think one in which people are actually aware of the power that they have as citizens, because politics as it stands is a civic arena where some people are more comfortable expressing themselves and activating than others are. And this is because traditionally it is often concealed in verbiage. It's something that people think you need to go to college to understand. It's something that people feel you have to pass through a series of filters and checks and balances in order to participate in. And my big thing, and I think the thing that we're discovering worldwide, is that we need to have a conversation about the fact that politics is power, and politics is all around you every day, whether or not you engage in policy. Because power is never static. Either you are enacting power or you're having power acted upon you. And your rights as a citizen are such and such a thing, but because you belong to a state, you also have certain responsibilities. And that's one half of the coin, and we hear it very often, but we also don't remember very often that politicians are called civil servants for a reason, and this reason is that the state also has responsibilities to you. It has responsibilities to communities, to understand their needs, and to allow them to participate peacefully if we actually want to claim that we belong to a democracy. As it stands, many communities don't feel like they have access to inform how policy forms in this country. And instead of asking for a seat at the table, my big ask is that we ask who is actually in the kitchen, and what privileges are being enshrined in the policies that we are trying to create. So yes, a united Ireland, but within Ireland, certain groups that are more othered than others. I, as a Black person, feel very much that I'm very tired of being called the quote unquote new Ireland. Why? I've been here for ages. I'm not new. And people who do come and who haven't been here for ages also have the privilege of citizenship, which entitles them to a voice in the way things happen here. And so as we proceed and as we talk about United Ireland, language and ideology is a power that I work with as an artist every day. What we normalize, who we other by our language, and what we consider is, traditional or good or to be protected. A huge part of what we need to unpack when we start to give people access to their right to inform change in their country.
Very good. Yeah, I think that's something that Eileen could definitely get behind in a couple of conversations that we had. Eileen, you were saying that, a traveller in Derry, should have the exact same rights as a traveller in Donegal. Somebody from those backgrounds shouldn't be divided by which county they're in. And, I think you've done an awful lot of work in that field already. So how do you think that, the reunification of Ireland could benefit both those people in either county?
I think first, it's for me personally, I love the Ireland that I was born into. I love Ireland. I love what we stand for, and I won't even say I love our history, but our history is a powerful history. So for me, and even for me as a traveller woman, I sometimes you have to have all different experience in life to make you the person you are today. And I think our experience as a nation has made us the people we are today. So I'm not looking for a new Ireland, like take it down and build a new one, because the people that's in it are very good people and had suffered very much to be where we are today. You know, for me as a traveller woman, I would love a fair Ireland. You know, and yes. A united Ireland, an Ireland that all works together, but that no community get left behind. Like if I live in Donegal at the moment, and like even now during the lockdown, you know, people can't go to Derry because it's seen as a different county. Yeah, people haven't got equality of access to some of the schools and stuff, and there's different laws just like a few minutes up the road from Letterkenny. Like you go to Letterkenny, and some members of my family actually think I live in one of the 6 counties, if you want, and I don't, you know. And I keep like, even I think we have to educate each other around what our past, if you want to say that, and what Arla was talking about. We need to have open discussion. We need to have dialogue. We need to be able to work together, and we're not always going to agree on something. But for me, it's that I went to, and I hope I'll get into no trouble for saying this, but I went and I went and visited the Falls Road in Belfast and Shankill Road, and there were no difference between the young people except the conflict, you know, the conflict in the past I'm talking about, not even the conflict today. And sometimes I know myself from my own family stuff, that conflict can be an awful lot to deal with, and can go on from generation to generation to generation, and we all know that. But for me, there are 2 working class areas in Belfast, children that don't have equal access to school, and obviously have class issues, just like that's that we all have. But for me, it's around really breaking down that, creating conversations for young people. And if I could say that, I'd love to see an Ireland that obviously is inclusive to the traveller community, to people of colour, to Muslim people, refugee people. And the Ireland I'm seeing right now, I'm not madly in love with. And that Ireland is when I see the tricolours being used to I'm seeing our flag being used around hatred. I'm seeing our flag being used around discrimination. I'm seeing it being used, and I know that we all have rights for our opinions and stuff, but I don't feel it's right that the way that the flag is being used at the moment. And I think that's a starting point. Maybe, you know, that like Ireland don't want to get rid of refugees. We don't want to not engage with travellers. We want rights of people, and it's not about money in Ireland, like, you know. So for me, I think the starting point would be really looking at our flag and what our flag means to us. And like, some of us know what it means, but some of us don't. And again, Niall, for me, I see it as a class issue. I see it as a big class issue. Like, if you're from, last night I went into the shop in Ballyfarmers, and the young man in the shop wasn't wearing a mask, and that's fine. And I just looked at him, and he was effing and blind and giving out to me because I speak with my eyes, you know. And that wasn't the Ireland. It's not the Ireland that that doesn't represent me. What those
Yeah.
people are doing right now doesn't represent me. It doesn't represent young people in Belfast, in Dublin, in Donegal. It doesn't do that. And again, it's around fairness. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of opportunity, Niall. Sorry, before I go, I would say it's equality of opportunity. We may all be from different backgrounds and stuff, but we all should be treated with equal value and respect, and have the same equality of opportunities.
That's great, Eileen, and I suppose that actually leads us perfectly to bring in Heather. I'm growing up with that background, and you can probably best articulate how you've come to the decision that you would like to see a new Ireland for all our citizens, and how that might become a more popular mindset amongst the Unionist community.
Right, I think First of all, like to reiterate what everybody else said, thank you for having us on tonight and for facilitating this. I think in terms of building a new Ireland, and a new Ireland that includes everybody, and I think others have already touched on it, it's going to have to be a broad coalition. And I think in order to do that, and in order to make people feel comfortable, and people with unionist background to feel comfortable, or people who are kind of not sure what their opinions are, we're going to, as best we can, have to take the politics out of this debate in the next few years. Of course, constitutional change and politics is inextricably linked, and there's nothing to be done about that. But my worry is that we're going to be so steeped in politics in this debate that people are going to disengage from it very quickly. So I think if we can take that out and give people room to challenge each other and talk about these things, it's going to be a much more comfortable for unionism to be a part of. But there's also a reality here that, die in the ditches will not want to be part of this conversation, and we have to accept that early. I mean, I don't want to have vast conversations with people about strengthening the union because I'm a nationalist, but it's about reaching out in the middle and about starting a dialogue with them, because I think there's a big percentage of people, it doesn't matter what their background is, it doesn't matter what their religion are, they just want to be able to push people. They want to know why they'll be more financially well in the south, their standard of living will be better, and they're the sorts of people that we need to be reaching out to in this conversation. But in terms of as well the unionist and Protestant community, I say this to people all the time, in the United Ireland there'll still be marching bands, there'll still be the Orange Order, and people will still want to fly a union flag from their house, and that has to be absolutely fine. And if that's not acceptable, that's not a unified state that I would want to be part of. So I think we have to accept that from the outset, that we're still going to have the DUP in the Dáil, for example. But I think there are things right in terms of this, what the outworkings are. So this is a big blank state. Could we look at something like a federal north, a federal Stormont, that instead of being devolved from Westminster is devolved from the Dáil? Is that some sort of compromise that we can look at to make unionists comfortable? I mean, I think it's all to look for, and that's what's exciting about this, that it's a completely blank slate, and we're starting from scratch. And I hope as many unionists do engage with this conversation as possible.
Oh, absolutely. This debate is dependent upon unionist involvement, because I think for many years we've seen, nationalists growing up in a state that was unfair to them, and the last thing that you would ever want to happen is to fairness onto unionists. And I think that probably allows me then to ask the question, of Laura, how do you feel that partition has affected the citizens of Ireland, both north and south?
Yeah, well, I think, partition creates a two-tiered system, I suppose, in terms of civil rights, in terms of human rights. And I think what's quite worrying as well is, if the British government pulls out of the European Court of Human Rights now, and if the Human Rights Act is repealed, and that's going to put the rights of thousands of citizens, I think, at risk. And I think that that's something that should be really setting off alarm bells for the government here as well. I think just in terms of, I suppose, imagining, what a new Ireland, I suppose, could look like, is, I think, when we talk about things like growing the economy, when we talk about things like improving agriculture, tackling climate chaos, improving the health system, I think that we need a shared Ireland approach in relation to that. And I mean, we can see what's happening at the moment with COVID-19 in particular. I mean, there's one approach in the north, there's another approach here, and I don't think that makes sense to have on one island. But I do think, in the lead up to, I suppose, any plans for a potential border poll, I think there's a lot of things that could be done. And I definitely do agree as well with what Heather was saying in terms of, the idea of having a federal system and a government system in the north. But I think a citizens' assembly, an all-Ireland citizens' assembly, could be something that could be done, not in terms of kicking the can away from politics, but in terms of giving it to the people, that it's made up of civil society. I think as well with presidential elections here, citizens in the north and citizens abroad should be able to vote in those elections. And I think it was a missed opportunity, with the Shannon appointments as well, that there wasn't, more representation, I suppose, from the North. So I do think that there are a lot of things that can be done kind of more immediately as well in relation to the issue. But definitely, I think it's great to be having the dialogue and to be having the debate and starting that. Another, I suppose, thing I was supposed to say was I think that there should be more funding made available, from both, governments in terms of having discussions like this, bringing citizens together, bringing different community groups together to talk and to discuss what that shared future can look like. I do think that that's something that could be looked at.
Yeah, no, that I suppose that just when you mentioned the Irish presidential election, and as an Irish person here in the north, I don't have the right to vote for the president or whoever that might be running for that position, and it brings me back to think about, I think it was 2003 when Tyrone played Armagh in the All Ireland final, and President Mary McAleese, who's originally from Belfast, came out to meet the teams, and neither her or her family or any of the players in the field that day in the All Ireland final are able to vote in an Irish presidential election. It seems not only strange but unfair, and that leads me back into one of the points that Denise made earlier, that this Ireland that we create, that young people of Ireland will create, because Ireland's under reform day and daily, and really, how do we make or give young people the ownership and the confidence to try to change Ireland day by day for the better? Denise.
I take this. Okay.
Yeah.
You know what? I think that the power of really just allowing things to be crystal clear is underrepresented. I listen to these conversations sometimes, and I wonder about a 15-year-old kid who's watching or listening to the conversation, not necessarily knowing what exactly we're discussing or why, feeling forced and being very attached to their parents, perhaps, ideas of politics. When I was in school, I knew a guy who incredibly nice, really, really, really emotional, constantly about this very same topic. And I went to him once and I asked him how and why he felt how he did, because I was still learning some things. And he told me that he felt frustrated and he was tired of answering that question. Because don't you know what we've been through as an Irish people? If I want to feel angry about colonization, I have the right to feel that way, but you wouldn't understand, Denise. And there are a couple of things happening there, right? There's a frustration that people are unheard. There is a pain, really, that people want to be heard and want to be involved, and so they are mimicking and adopting their parents' ideologies. But there is a place in which there's also a cognitive disconnect from history, because if there's anyone who can understand frustration about a colonial background, I get it, right? On two levels, as an Irish person and a Black woman, I get it. And here's where we need to bridge the gap, is that we need to start to communicate these things as the very real and rich parts of our everyday life that they are, from an emotional as well as an intellectual standpoint. Like, we cannot be living with this like Enlightenment hangover anymore, where you have to communicate things in a certain way and philosophize around the table again and again and again before this is real. Because where are the people who we're trying to speak to? Where are these kids who are going to be Ireland's future? They're on Twitter, they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram listening to different influencers, they're dealing with a pandemic. They're looking to see also, is this Ireland, is this future that we're working for going to actually help them in the middle of some of the most turbulent historical times we've ever seen? And our responsibility, actually, as adults who are maybe a little bit older, or people who are their peers, is to start to pare down these discussions and to find people where they're at and to communicate to them where they're at instead of where we're at, because that's not the same thing. And we run into the danger of like repeating historically how we have had conversations about politics. Instead of finding new ways to communicate in new languages, because the political landscape of this country is changing. In the South, we've had 2 major referendums in the last number of years, and they reflect the heart of a country that is moving away from something and moving towards something, right? Whatever you feel about that, it reflects a desire, a need, right? And I, as a musician, yes, I definitely have a history in sociology. I have a history in politics. I have all of this academic background, but I find that when you communicate to someone through a medium like music, right, it breaks down people's defenses. Why? Because I'm not preaching at you. I am telling you, though, that this is serious and it's important, and you need to make up your mind about what you think about this, because it's just as important as your TD down the road. Whatever he thinks is actually supposed to be a reflection of whatever you think. He represents you. So what do you think? And trying to reinforce again and again and again that we cannot gatekeep these conversations is really my major thing. Because like, will we find a way to unify if we are stuck in our academic silos? I don't think so. We do have a responsibility to move out and to go and to find people and to start to speak in their language sometimes, as uncomfortable or strange or difficult as that might be, because that's how you'll find people will start to speak in ours too.
I think that's a great point, because we're so lucky, and we have to recognise the fact that we're living in a time when these subjects are not taboo. We can speak of them. We can speak of so many things that it was unconscionable to think that people would talk about freely 50 years ago, and therein lies the responsibility on us, which you're so eloquently laying out, Denise. And we need to take advantage of that as people and as leaders within our community. And I think to bring Conall in here, I think what we've seen from the British government, the bills that they're trying to pass of late, it makes a lot of people quite uncomfortable. And I'm asking you, as a young Irishman in the North who is being governed in that way, how do you feel that you could best probably explain to your Unionist counterpart in the North, look, it doesn't have to be like this?
Yes, I just want to say before I answer your question, I hope Eileen had a great time in Belfast, because the Falls Road is the best road of any road in Ireland. So I hope she had a good time when she was up and she enjoyed herself. But I think what needs to be recognised here in all of this here is decisions made across the water in London are not made in our interest. They have never been made in our interest, and not to go back to the history of it. The setting up of both of these states was a power play by the Conservatives 100 years ago. We are now 100 years down the lane, and another power play by the Conservatives is going to dictate our future. So one of the big things coming out of this year for me and for all these conversations is reconciliation, and how we, it isn't just about decision ways. If we do get this border poll, and if we do get this referendum, and if we are talking about this Ireland, I think Eileen touched on it as well. It isn't just about reconciling 2 communities in the North. It isn't just about reconciling Catholics and Protestants, Nationalists and Unionists. It's about reconciling the North and South. We are 100 years of 2 distinct jurisdictions on this island, and both conservative in their own right. And we are now at a stage where, and I think Heather touched on it, or it might have been Laura touched on it, 2 referendums have passed around progressive issues in the South. So we're in a process of transition in this island. And just to go back to that reconciliation point, I'm down on the panel here as an Irish language activist, so I have to bring it in somewhere. But I personally believe, and one of the views that I would hold very close to my heart, is that our best tool for reconciliation on this island is the language. And there's a couple of reasons for that there. And I am not sectarian, and I don't believe that some of the things that are kind of, actually can't think of a phrase that's but let me think of it in Irish, but Corra, Light and the Gaelic are things that are kind of that are put to the Irish language, is that it is contentious. It is contentious as a result of its history and as a result of systematic destruction and legislation against it. But this conversation has to be forward-looking, and I think one of the most exciting developments in the last 20 years on this island is the work that is going on in East Belfast around the Irish language by the likes of Linda Irvine, Gordon McCoy, Augustine Nagade, people who aren't them, and the tourists, and the establishment of the second, it's not the first GAA club was established in the Short Strand, but the second GAA club that was established in the north or in East Belfast, and who are now fielding teams. And this talk of a new Ireland, these people are leading the charge. And I think, just to go back to that point about the Irish language, when we're talking, and this is, people often, I wasn't researching this, I was reading, but in the Irish worldview and kind of as a progressive step towards the future, I was reading recently and I couldn't come across, well, I came across this sentence at this point, that the word pobble, the word for community in Irish is pobble. And in the Irish worldview, if you look back at 2,000 years, and it shows you how progressive this is, so that we are forward looking. That's why I believe that it is entitled to the future. The word pobble has no plural in Irish. It is pobble. We are all a pobble. So it is not about. It's about bringing together the traveller community. It's about bringing together our newcomer families, our refugees, and it's about pobble. And the word, and just another point, just to demonstrate how kind of forward thinking this language is, and what I believe could be used as a tool. The word for reconciliation is achwinteris. The word winter in Irish means family. It means kind of people that are close to you, people who are around you, and ach meaning re. So the translation for reconciliation in Irish literally means to come together as one, to be one people again. And I think that is something, as if we are progressing this conversation, as we are looking to the future, that we have to, I do think personally that Irish has a big part to play in it, and the language doesn't, and the culture does, because if something so forward thinking could have been thought of 2,000 years ago, it definitely has some part to play now. So it is about the pobble. It is about the pobble, and it is about achwinteris, and it's about achwinteris not only for Catholics and Protestants on this island, and not only for Nationalists and Unionists, but for everybody, that we bring our people together and we move forward as a unit together collectively, like Chaila. So bit of a long one there to your answer to your question, but I think it's an important point that needs to be made.
No, it is, and I think it's very, very, it's very apt, because I think everybody on the panel here knows that there is so much more that unites us rather than what divides us. I think of the farmer here in Cushendall. He has so much in common with the farmer in Cove and County Cork, and our economies are intertwined. A lot of them are agri-food based, and we have so many SMEs of which our economy is based on. That shift from to join both economies wouldn't be the biggest bridge to gap in the world. And even when I think of myself as a sportsman, rugby, it is played on an all-island basis. Hockey is played on an all-island basis, as is cricket, as is boxing, as is the GAA. From my own point of view, I think the best thing that we have to offer to the Unionist community is the GAA. Not only our games, which are fantastic, but the support structure of which the GAA gives to all communities, and not only to the Unionist community, but I think we've seen so many communities who have come into Ireland and have now got involved in the GAA, and it's helping them to integrate into society so well, and it's given them a focal point and a foothold in those communities, which is massive and which is really, really important. And I think just the point that you brought up, Eileen, about you're working in Donegal and living there at the minute, and yet there's a different set of rules, if you like. Only a few miles down the road. It would be fantastic if we were able to share every inch and every blade of grass on this island together as one. And the question that I'm asking you, Eileen, is how do you've worked in so many different communities now for travellers' rights and for equal rights for many different people. How would you see those systems being joined together, to allow that to happen for somebody in Derry, and allow the same support to be there for someone in Donegal? I think you're on mute maybe there, Eileen. No problem.
Sorry, guys. For me, the critical, important people in all this conversation is actually young people and the innocence of young people. When I say the innocence, I mean, like, it's nothing to do with what Denise was talking about earlier on. Like, politics is, politics can be good, can be bad. It has got an impact in every bit of our lives, even to the way that we dress. I remember one time actually doing a workshop with young people in Derry, and they were saying to me politics doesn't impact their life, and they were drinking cans, these old cheap cans, and she was 21, and I said those cans look ridiculous, like, where'd you get them, in Lidl or Aldi or something? And she named the name of the cheap place where she got her cheap cans. So I compared her to, and I said, another woman your age who's 21 will be drinking champagne, blah, blah, blah. And she goes, do you think? I said, yeah, like, imagine you had a good job, and imagine. And she really got what politics was about, right? And it was actually so funny, even down to talking about a drink, to a young woman. But she came over to me afterwards and she said to me, I get it, Eileen. I get what you're trying to say. It's because we don't work, because of where we're from and stuff, which is to a certain extent is true. But I have this vision in my head listening to everybody speak. And I would love probably to do some work on with Francis around it, because it would be so possible to do. Do you know, like, while we talk about climate change, and climate change is ever so sexy, and it's also great having a lovely clean world and stuff, a lot of communities are not there. A lot of communities wouldn't really even know what climate change even means. And I think it was very powerful when we had young people in the chambers talking about climate change. I would love to see young people from cross-border different communities using the chambers and get national event from it, and to be asked some questions around, what is it to you? What does it mean to you to be Irish? Would you like to see it? And I think that could be very powerful, and take it away kind of even from adults for a little while, and give it into the hands of young people who's living in these areas. Like, my opinion, and maybe it's just my opinion, I don't know. There's a Lavery Park in Ballyfarm at Rhinebarton, where it's the oldest site, it's the oldest official halting site in Ireland. But there's also a Lavery Park in Derry, and they're two completely different halting sites, and have different needs. But again, like, it's about really bringing people, marrying the two communities and making the one. But I think young people, and what Hurler was saying around the All Ireland Citizens Assembly, that could be very powerful as well. It's taking it away. Like, if the young people was our politicians, I imagine that we would have an All Ireland by now. And I would love to see that kind of as maybe even a starting point of discussion, starting with the young people. I think it'd be very powerful, because they're more impacted with it. Like, I've heard stories from young people in all parts of Ireland, talking about their father being shot, and coming from all communities, if you want to say that.
Of course.
And how that has an impact on young people even today in Ireland. So I'd love to be able to do some work with the young people. Yeah.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there, and there's shared hurt on all sides of the community, north and south. And Heather, I suppose, is that something that you think could work? Understanding the Unionist and Protestant background so well, maybe a citizens' assembly that works for people between 16 and 20 years of age.
Well, yeah, look, I agree definitely with what Eileen said about, and I think Conall said it too, about engaging with young people. And I heard it said not so long ago about, especially from a kind of Northerner's point of view, that our young people's worldview in the North is no longer reflected in the murals of our past. I thought that was a very powerful way to put it. So I think we need to find out what the young people want. And Conall said it as well, but this has to be forward facing. It has to be unapologetically looking to the future. It cannot be about the demerits of the United Kingdom, Great Britain, the Tories, the DUP, or the injustices of the past. It has to be about healthcare, has to be about the economy. It has to be about whether young people can buy houses. So for every conversation about a border poll or the mechanics of a referendum, there has to be 10 times as many conversations about the standard of living and the type of Ireland that we want to live in. So it would definitely be very I think beneficial to have an All-Ireland Civic Assembly for young people specifically from all backgrounds, not just Catholic, Protestant, not just Unionist, Nationalist, but from a Muslim background or refugees or travellers or anywhere else, to see how we can build this unified state together that doesn't just reflect the kind of the issues of our past, but about what sort of an Ireland that we want to live in going forward.
No, I think I can see heads nodding in all corners of my screen there, Heather. And whenever that opportunity is afforded to the people of Ireland, I think, how do you think the Unionist community would respond? Do you think there would be buy-in?
Well, I mean, it really depends. I mean, if you're a Unionist, you will want to be part of the United Kingdom. And I think, we have to have said it earlier in this, that we have to accept that from the outset. And it is about that cohort of people in the middle who aren't quite so sure what they want. And it's about selling something to them. So I think that's really important. And I think as well, I just wanted to touch on as well about the timeline for all of this, Neil. Sorry, as well.
Sure.
We talk about, there are some people that kind of talk around, we're going to have a united Ireland. It's inevitable. Nothing's inevitable. I disagree with that. And we're going to see it in the next 3 to 5 years. And, for me, this is the start of a process, but it's the start of a very long process and one that can't be rushed. And I think if any kind of Unionist or Protestant or loyalist or whatever you want to say feels like they're being railroaded into something, that's not going to work. And we need to take our time with this, and we need to get it absolutely right.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And just to bring you in there, Laura, you've been part of campaigns now that have seen referendums come to a conclusion in a fairly stable manner in the aftermath. How do you think this can be done in a similar fashion?
Yeah, well, I think, what we saw, I suppose, with the marriage referendum here and the referendum to repeal the 8th, I suppose, just been involved in those. And I just want to echo what's been said about young people. They played an absolutely instrumental role in those campaigns. And there's a saying in Irish, Molanoiga agus Chukig Shi. So, praise the young and they will flourish. And I think it's really important that we ensure that young people are intrinsically part of this, because it is about their future, primarily. But I think, there's a big responsibility on the media as well, I think, in terms of how they, set up debates or how they cover this issue. I think it needs to include all voices, but it needs to be in a very respectful way. And I think that's really, really important. I think it was kind of hit or miss as part of the referenda that we saw here in terms of how that was handled. So I do think that's something that needs to be looked at. But certainly I think all sides, need to have a say. It needs to be respectful. It shouldn't be shouty. It should be about having a conversation and discussing what it might look like. And I do think it shouldn't be rushed. I think, it does need to be thought through, because, if there is a vote on this, it's very likely kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. It needs to be handled correctly. And I think the groundwork really needs to be laid. And I know it is to an extent, these discussions are happening, but I think we need to open it up with the idea of a citizens' assembly with more discussions, like this. And I think that it should be led by civil society. I think that was really important, that it isn't, I suppose, one political party or seen to be just politics driving it and politicians, because I think that can turn a lot of people off. I think it needs to be led by, people from all walks of life and be very inclusive of all communities, people of colour, traveller community, the LGBTQ community. Everybody needs to be involved. Sports people need to be involved, and experts, in different areas. So it needs to be really holistic in that regard, and respectful, I think, is the key the key part of that. So yeah, that'll be my kind of views on it. Yeah.
Very good. And I suppose for many people who are watching this panel discussion, Denise, I know they will probably be familiar with yourself after your interview in the Late Late Show, which came across very well, and you used that platform excellently to describe what your ambition for this country and what it can become. And I think obviously your star is continuing to shine and grow. If you were picking up an Emmy or a Grammy in the morning, how would you use that platform to speak to the young people of this country?
The exact same way I'm using it now. I think that there's very little variation in who I am as a person because I don't have the brain space or the imagination actually to have a different persona. I just am this. But like I work at the bedrock of all of my work is a question about identity that I keep on asking people. Because since I was very young, people asked me where I was from. And they would challenge me, and they would feel entitled to challenge me and rob me of my identifiers every day, especially if I told them that I was Irish, right? And at this point in my life, that is a hard boundary that no one's allowed to violate anymore, because no, just quite simply, no eloquence, no more words, just no. And I think that comes from this thing in me that like every time I have a moment to speak to people, what I'm asking again and again and again is, what does Irishness mean? And how can we make it mean something that moves away from shallow interpretations and like physical kind of characteristics and all of this stuff, and very, very loose and easily undermined characteristics into something really real, something about integrity, something about how we have a history of like immigration, something about community, something about a history of community that is embedded within the Irish language itself, something about the way we are as people, something about how our sense of humor is notoriously sound, but like really hard to get to grips with when you travel. Something about how, if I meet an American couple in a random pub in the middle of like the Ukraine, I'm not there, so you can tell me that I'm not Irish because your uncle's sister's cousin's goldfish was from like Cavan at some point, And we need to move into a place where people no longer feel empowered to wield Irishness as a weapon against people who are not able-bodied, against people who are Black or brown, against people like Irishness cannot be a weapon that white supremacists use to beat people over the head because they are comfortable using it as their sort of like pastoral vision of, oh, no Black people here. They can't touch me. This is my safe place. No. Is Irish a safe place for all Irish people? Is the question that I keep on asking. And how do we talk about Irishness in a way that from our language to our bones, is reflective of what actually exists in this country? Not what we wish was there, not what we were taught was there, but what is here, what is right now. And I'm really aware that like there are a lot of people who wish they could have been part of this debate. Like I know a lot of Black people up north and down south who grew up with these like increasingly debilitating identity complexes because their community rejected them like inherently from the inside out, because you see it in the way we're spoken about now. We're the new Irish. We're something strange. We're something abnormal. We're something that's just come to the fore. We're something that is a marvel, something to sort of be exhibited and examined. And that in itself really begins to eat at the soul of someone and undermine their very, very natural right to citizenship as a whole, like just their civic right to participate in this country with power and conviction in their voice. And that's something that I refuse to accept because I hit at that in myself. I had a lot of friends who were travelers growing up who bonded with me over this mutual thing of like, how do we move out of this? How do we empower each other? How do we get over being othered? And I really love this idea that, like Heather brought up earlier, of having like a caucus amongst young people. But again, I reiterate, the young people that we're going to get at that caucus are going to be young middle class or upper middle class people whose parents have been educated to a certain level, or who themselves are educated to a certain level, who are already comfortable speaking in the language of the political sphere. Because a lot of this is about inaccessibility due to an identity complex and a confidence like undermining thing, because we live in an oppressive institution that actually does have classism at its core. It has racism at its core. It has ableism at its core. And before we can get to a point where we look at Ireland and we start to talk about a unified Ireland, we have a few responsibilities. We have to grapple with our history and find who we are in the middle of that. We have to really examine and identify who we are as Irish people and start to defend that and enact that in a way that protects people. And then we'll have the healthy conversations that we want to see happen. Because you cannot invite someone who is oppressed to sit at the table and speak their mind if they are going to risk like their livelihoods or their safety in order to do so. Yeah, we have hope though. We do.
Yeah, no, I think you're chipping away at those negative stereotypes with every word that we hear you speak, Denise. And I think whenever you said from our language to our bones, that probably resonates with each and every one of us, and very much so with you, Conall, and how you were beginning to speak about how you feel the language, because of who preserved it in the first place to keep it alive, can act as a kind of a truck to bring us all together.
Yes, no, 100%, and this is what it is. And when we're talking about this, has to be forward facing, but it also has to be directly influenced by our past and by our shared heritage. And I would challenge a lot of Irish people, north and south, to know that the people behind the initial Irish language revival in the turn of the last century were for the most part Presbyterians, were for the most part Protestants, were for the most part from a Protestant tradition, and who understood. And there's actually, not to go into history, but there was actually, I forget the guy's name, but Grand Marshal of the Orange Order, I think in the 1890s, was an Irish speaker. He was a fluent Irish speaker, and so and to go back with the language, I think personally, and I think I've already said it, the Irish language unites us. It doesn't divide us. I think personally, it is our shared heritage. It is our shared. If we're talking about things that we're going to share going forward here, and what tools and what different things we're going to use to promote the coming together of people, I don't think there's a better thing than the language. And this has to be forward facing. All of this conversation has to be forward facing. We are 100 years from this initial conversation began. We don't want to be sitting here in another 100 years' time thrashing out the same conversations. And the point that I would like to make, just kind of as we are coming to a close here, is it's not about, we have to begin. The point about it, we have to begin these conversations. We do have to begin these conversations. We don't want to be sitting here in 100 years' time with this question still unresolved. And that doesn't mean it has to be a New Ireland, whatever shape or form that New Ireland takes. If it is a federal state in the north, if it's a provincial, federal state, whatever shape or forms this New Ireland takes, we all have to be involved in the conversation, and we have to. There's an onus on everybody, and there's an onus on everybody in this conversation, and everybody watching at home, to include as many people in that as possible. And from a selfish point of view, if they could do it as Gaeilge, it would be great. But on that aside, everyone has to be involved, and we have to make sure that this is no voice is left unheard. And I think that tonight's been an excellent example of what can be achieved when you bring together 6 individuals from very different backgrounds, with a shared goal of improving the quality of life of people living on this island. So,
no, superb, and just as you mentioned there, the Orange Order. I know I really want everybody to feel comfortable in Ireland, no matter what form or shape it would take if there was constitutional change. And I suppose that my question to you, Heather, would be, how do you feel that we best include, say, the Orange Order? in an Ireland where it's changed, and to make sure that they understand that their point of view is every bit as important as somebody living in Dublin or Cork or Kerry?
To be quite blunt, Neil, I think, we just include the Orange Order the way we would include any member living in the North if they're from a Unionist or Protestant background, because, sometimes we talk about the Orange Order, but they're not totally reflective of the Unionist community in the North. So, I mean, of course they have a stake in this, but they've no bigger or smaller stake than anybody else. But I suppose, I guess they have, access to a large number of other people, but they're not the only voice within Northern Unionism that we need to access. And I think just going back to Conall's point there and about the Irish language, just to kind of ram home the point here that how far we have to go. I'd never heard the Irish language being spoken before until the Irish Language Act started to be debated in Stormont, and Irish language groups started to come up to Stormont, and we were engaging with them, and people were on the news. I'd never heard anybody speaking in Irish before, and I'm nearly 30, and I live on the island of Ireland, so I think that just shows how far we have to go. And I just wanted to make that point as well. But yeah, so just so Conall, you can teach me and speak a wee bit of Irish anytime.
If anybody wants a class at the end of this year, give me a shout, and we'll set up a 6-way Irish class, and Neil can take it. Neil can be sure number at all.
I don't think we could afford your services, Conall. So no, that's a great point, because I suppose whenever we think about there 1 in 6 of the people who are living in Ireland are actually not born here. That's a similar number of people who identify as Unionist here. So there are so many groups, there is so much diversity that we must include in this conversation when we get the opportunity to have it fully. And I suppose, Laura, just to come back to yourself, because you do have such experience in how this can be done, and I feel that you believe that this being done almost independent, or not almost independent of the political parties, but with the political parties taking a step back, would you feel that's the best way for a progressive and a free debate?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I think coalitions need to be built, and I think that needs to include the political parties. I don't think that we'll see unless the political parties are driving it. They need to bring it forward. If there is to be a border poll, in terms of how that's conducted. So I don't think they need to take a step back per se, but I think that they need to make sure to allow voices from civil society, individual citizens, to kind of come to the fore. For example, I think that's a lot more powerful than watching a TV debate where you have politicians going head to head. You have people from civil society from all walks of life that people can identify with. I think that's a lot more powerful. And I think what we saw as well with the referendums here was the power of the personal story. People telling their own stories about what this means to them, about how it affects them, on a day-to-day basis, why they're passionate about this issue. I think it's about really bringing those stories to the fore, and real people from all walks of life. I think that's really, really important, and it is about building coalitions and all different communities coming together as part of a campaign under kind of a unified sort of brand and messaging around the issue. But I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of getting to that point. And as I said earlier, and I think other people have said, I don't think it's something that should be just kind of rammed through and kind of rushed, but something that needs to be well thought out and constructed in a really inclusive way. But I think it's a very exciting prospect. And I think that it's certainly a debate that needs to be had, and I don't think we should shy away from that. I think that people are well able to debate and to discuss on this island, in a respectful manner. I think that I think it's certainly something that a lot of people feel needs to happen, and I think a lot of people would feel very passionate about it. So I think inclusivity is key, really, in terms
Definitely.
of any action.
No, I think absolutely, and I think that brings us to our conclusion really well. I think the panelists here and the diversity that we have tonight, and how everybody has spoken about the inclusivity and the collectiveness that that we are all so in favour of. I think we've had enough of division. There's no future in that. And that has been so eloquently put across by each and every one of you. I want to thank you so much for your participation tonight. You have been absolutely fantastic and inspirational, each and every one of you. So thank you very, very much. And I hope everybody who is listening to this online really enjoys the lesson. Thank you.